moment I saw the folding chair, I understood exactly where I stood in my own son's house. It was Thanksgiving, and everyone else was seated around the long walnut dining table that I had helped pay for 3 years ago. Matching chairs, cloth napkins, candles flickering in brass holders I did not recognize. My daughter-in-law Jolene had arranged the place settings with the kind of precision that left no room for accident. 11 seats, 11 guests, and then me, arriving with a sweet potato pie in my hands and nowhere to sit. Dwight spotted me standing in the doorway and jumped up with a quick laugh. "Hold on, Mama, let me grab something from the garage." He came back carrying a metal folding chair, the kind you see at church overflow events, grey, cold, slightly rusted at the hinges. He wedged it between the corner of the table and the wall, where the heating vent blew warm air directly against my left ankle. There was no place setting, no napkin. Jolene smiled at me from across the room, the kind of smile that costs nothing and means even less. I set the pie on the counter and took my seat without saying a word. At 68 years old, I have learned that humiliation does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives with a folding chair and a silence that nobody else seems to notice. The meal was beautiful. Jolene had ordered most of it from a catering company, though she spoke about the preparation as if she had been in the kitchen since dawn. Herb-crusted turkey, garlic mashed potatoes, roasted Brussels sprouts with balsamic glaze. Everyone received a full plate, passed from the head of the table where Dwight sat carving with theatrical precision. My plate arrived last. Turkey scraps piled beside a spoonful of cold stuffing and what looked like reheated green beans from a container I recognized as leftovers from the week before. I stared at the plate. Then I looked up and caught the eyes of my granddaughter, Sable, sitting 3 chairs away. She was watching me with a quiet intensity that made my chest tighten. She was only 15, but her gaze carried the kind of awareness that most adults spend a lifetime avoiding. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but Jolene tapped her wrist and whispered something sharp. Sable looked down at her plate and said nothing. Conversation moved around me like water around a stone. Jolene's sister talked about her new condo in the Heights. Dwight's business partner described a client trip to Cabo. Someone mentioned the new car Dwight had just leased, a glossy black Range Rover parked in the driveway like a trophy. I knew exactly where the down payment for that car had come from. The same place it always came from. My savings. When dessert arrived, Jolene brought out a 3-layer cake from a bakery downtown. My sweet potato pie sat untouched on the counter, still wrapped in the foil I had carried it in. Nobody mentioned it. Nobody cut a slice. It sat there the way I sat there, present but unacknowledged. As the evening ended and guests began pulling on coats and exchanging goodbyes, Dwight walked me to the front door. His phone was already in his hand, thumb scrolling through something that had nothing to do with me. "Drive safe, Mama. Roads might be slick tonight." I nodded and stepped onto the porch. The Houston air was thick and cool, heavy with the smell of cut grass and distant rain. I walked to my car, an 11-year-old Camry that still ran clean because I maintained it the way I maintained everything in my life, with patience and without complaint. Before I turned the key, I looked back at the house. Through the large front window, I could see Jolene laughing with her sister, wine glass in hand. Dwight was nowhere in sight. The house glowed warm and golden, and from the outside, it looked like a place where everyone was loved. But I had been inside. I knew better. The drive home took 20 minutes, though the streets felt longer in the dark. My neighborhood in Third Ward was quieter than it used to be. Some houses had been bought and renovated by people who had never lived there. Others sat patient and unchanged, like mine. When I stepped through my front door, the silence wrapped around me like a familiar coat. I did not turn on the television. I walked to the kitchen, filled the kettle, and sat down at the small wooden table where I had spent 30 years paying bills, clipping coupons, and balancing the kind of budget that left no room for carelessness. My husband Herman had built that table. His hands had sanded every edge, stained every plank. He died 9 years ago, and the table still carried the faint smell of cedar when the house got warm. I sipped my tea and let the memories surface. After Herman passed, The grief hit Dwight harder than I expected. He was 32 then, already married, already a father, but he crumbled like a boy who had lost his first safe place. He missed rent, then he missed another. I covered both months without being asked. When his first attempt at a landscaping business failed and left him $12,000 in debt, I wrote the check. When Jolene insisted they needed a larger house in a better school district, I provided the earnest money, $23,000, transferred on a Tuesday afternoon, never discussed again. Then came tuition. Private school for Sable and her younger brother. Jolene had toured 6 campuses and chosen the most expensive one, the one with the French immersion program and the lacrosse team. I paid the first year, then the second, then the third. Somewhere along the way, the word help disappeared from the conversation entirely. It was simply expected. After tuition came the rest. The family car payment when their credit was stretched too thin. The medical bill from Sable's emergency appendectomy. The water heater replacement Jolene said they couldn't afford. The summer camp. The orthodontist. The trip to the Bahamas that Dwight said was for his anniversary, though I noticed the charge included 6 airline tickets, not 2. Every year I told myself the same thing. You do this because you love them. You do this because you can. One day they will see what you gave and understand. But understanding never came. Only more requests, delivered in softer and softer voices, until they barely sounded like requests at all. I set my tea down and walked to the back bedroom I used as an office. On the shelf above the desk sat a thick green binder, the one I had kept since Herman died. Inside were bank statements, cancelled checks, transfer receipts, handwritten notes of every dollar I had sent to Dwight and Jolene over 9 years. The total was somewhere north of $340,000. I had never added it all up at once. I was afraid of what the number would feel like. But that night I opened the binder and something caught my eye that I had not noticed before. Tucked behind the most recent bank statement was a printed letter from my brokerage firm, addressed to me but opened, with a yellow sticky note in handwriting I did not recognize. The letter confirmed a request to add a secondary authorized user to my investment account. The name on the request was Dwight's. I had never authorized this. I had never been asked. I read the letter twice, slowly, then a third time with the kind of stillness that arrives when shock gives way to understanding. He was not just leaning on me anymore. He was reaching into my life without my knowledge, positioning himself to take what I had not offered. I closed the binder gently. The clasp clicked shut in the quiet room, and the sound felt final, like a door locking from the inside. I sat in that chair for a long time, watching the light from the street lamp press through the curtain. For 9 years I had given away pieces of myself believing it was love. But love does not move in silence through your accounts. Love does not add its name to things it did not earn. By 5 the next morning, I was dressed and sitting at the kitchen table with the binder beside me and a cup of tea cooling in my hands. Sleep had not come, but clarity had, and clarity turned out to be far more useful. I left the house before sunrise, driving through the empty Houston streets toward the Chase branch on Westheimer, where I had banked for over 20 years. The sky was the color of pewter, and the air tasted like rain that had not yet decided to fall. I arrived before the doors opened and waited in my car with the engine off and the windows cracked. At 9 sharp, I walked inside and asked for the senior account manager. A woman named Lena Cordova met me in a glass-walled office near the back. She was sharp-featured and careful in the way she spoke, the kind of person who weighs every word before releasing it. "What can I do for you this morning, Mrs. Fontaine?" I placed the binder on her desk. "I need to cancel every automatic transfer going out of my accounts. All of them. Today." She opened the binder and scanned the documents the way a doctor reads a chart, without visible reaction, but with a tightening behind the eyes that suggested she had seen this pattern before. She clicked through several screens, then looked up. "There are currently 9 recurring transfers linked to your checking and savings accounts. Several are going to accounts that do not carry your name." I nodded. "I want them stopped. All of them." She paused. "There is also a pending request to add a secondary signer to your investment account. It was submitted electronically 3 weeks ago. Were you aware of this? I met her eyes. I was not. Lena exhaled slowly. I will flag that request immediately and place a freeze on any changes to that account until you provide written authorization in person. For the next 40 minutes, we moved through every account. Credit cards Dwight and Jolene had been using as authorized users were deactivated. Automatic payments to their mortgage company were halted. A recurring transfer of $1,500 that I had set up 5 years ago and forgotten about was finally cancelled. With each form I signed, something loosened inside my chest. Not anger, not satisfaction, just the feeling of reclaiming territory I had quietly surrendered. When we finished, Lena printed the confirmation and slid it across the desk. Everything is locked down. You are the sole authority on all your accounts now. No changes can be made without your physical presence and signature. I thanked her, gathered the papers, and stood. My knees ached from the chair, but the pain felt honest, and a reminder that I was still here and still capable of protecting what was mine. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds. I stood beside my car and breathed the warm air. For the first time in years, I had done something for myself without asking anyone's permission. The storm arrived faster than I expected. I was home by 11, sitting at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of tea and the windows open to let the breeze move through the house. My phone began buzzing shortly after noon. 3 calls in a row, all from Dwight. Then a text. Mama, something is wrong with the cards. Call me. Then another. My business account just got flagged. I can't process a single payment. I'm in front of a client. This is a disaster. Then Jolene. She did not call. She texted in capital letters. My card was declined the Salon. I was in the middle of a color treatment. They made me sit in the chair while they ran it twice. They ran it twice. Call me now. I set the phone face down on the table and drank my tea. For the rest of the afternoon, the messages continued. Some panicked, some furious. Dwight left a voicemail that swung between confusion and accusation. Jolene sent a text that read simply, "This had better be a mistake." None of them asked how I was. None of them asked if something had happened to me. Not one message carried even the shape of concern. They wanted the money restored. That was all. Around 3 o'clock, a different name appeared on my phone. Sable. The text was short. "Grandma, are you okay?" I heard Mom and Dad yelling about the bank. I typed back, "I am fine, baby. How are you?" A minute passed. "I'm okay. They're really mad. They're saying the bank made an error. Dad is on the phone with someone right now." I smiled faintly. "Thank you for checking on me, Sable. You are the only one who did." She sent a heart emoji, one small red shape that carried more weight than every word Dwight and Jolene had sent combined. By 4 o'clock, the yelling arrived at my front porch. I heard the engine first, loud and aggressive, followed by the hard slam of a car door. Then a second slam. I walked to the window and saw Dwight striding up the walkway, jaw clenched, Jolene 2 steps behind him with her arms folded tight across her chest. Her hair was only half finished from the salon, the roots still dark on one side, and I could see that detail enraged her more than anything else. Dwight knocked hard. "Mama, open up. We need to talk." I stood behind the door for a moment, then unlocked it. They pushed in before I had fully stepped aside. The living room felt smaller with their anger in it. "What did you do?" Dwight said, his voice cracking with frustration. "My payment to the contractor bounced. The car lease is overdue. The mortgage company called Jolene twice today." I sat down in the chair by the window, the same chair Herman used to read in after dinner. "I made changes to my accounts," I said. "My accounts." Jolene stepped forward. "You had no right to shut off our cards without warning." "Actually," I said calmly, "they were never your cards." Dwight ran his hands over his face. "Mama, we are drowning. You can't just pull the rug out from under us like this." I looked at him for a long moment. "When did your life become my rug to pull?" The silence stretched. Jolene broke it with the voice she used when she wanted to sound reasonable but was actually issuing a command. We just need you to reactivate the accounts while we figure out a new arrangement. No. The word landed between us like a stone dropped into still water. Jolene's expression tightened. Dwight's eyes widened. Before either of them could respond, the front door opened softly. Sable stepped inside, her school backpack still hanging off one shoulder. She looked pale, the way children look when they have heard too much from behind a closed door. Jolene turned sharply. I told you to wait in the car. Sable ignored her. She walked toward me, and her voice trembled when she spoke. Grandma, I need to tell you something. I heard Dad on the phone last night. He was talking to someone about getting control of your house. He said if he could get power of attorney, he could sell it and pay off everything they owe. He said you probably wouldn't even understand what was happening. The room went cold. Not the temperature. The air itself seemed to change weight, pressing down on all of us. Dwight's face drained of color. Jolene's mouth opened, then closed. I looked at Sable, who was fighting tears she clearly did not want her parents to see. Thank you for telling me, sweetheart. That was very brave. Jolene recovered first. She's exaggerating. She heard half a conversation and made up the rest. But Dwight did not deny it. He stood completely still, hands at his sides, eyes fixed on the floor. That silence was louder than anything he could have said. I stood up slowly. This is not about Flausquing. This is not about Thanksgiving. This is not about a credit card or a salon appointment. This is about whether I am safe in my own life. And the answer, until today, was no. Dwight flinched. I continued, my voice steady. I gave because I loved you. I kept giving because I thought love required it. But love is not a blank check, and I am not a bank account with a heartbeat. Nobody spoke. Jolene grabbed her purse from the couch and walked toward the door. Come on, Dwight. This is pointless. But Dwight did not move. He stood in my living room, looking at his daughter, then at me, then at the floor again. Something behind his eyes was shifting, cracking open like earth after a long drought. Jolene left without him. The car door slammed. The engine started. She pulled away from the curb hard enough to make the tires chirp against the pavement. Sable sat beside me on the arm of the chair and rested her head against my shoulder. I put my hand over hers and said nothing. Dwight finally looked up. His voice was barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, Mama. The two words hung in the room like smoke. I studied his face and saw something I had not seen in years. Not the grown man who leased luxury cars and hosted dinner parties where his mother sat in a folding chair. I saw the boy who used to press his face against my shoulder during thunderstorms, the one who cried in the hospital hallway when his father died and whispered, "What do I do now?" I did not respond right away. Some apologies need space before they can be received, he went on. I stopped seeing you as my mother a long time ago. I started seeing you as the person who fixed things. And when Jolene and I got in deeper and deeper, I told myself you didn't mind, that it was just what you did, that you had enough, and it didn't cost you anything. He swallowed. But it cost you everything, didn't it? I looked at him steadily. Not everything. I still have myself. That is what I am choosing to protect now. He left an hour later, quieter than he had arrived. At the door, he paused. Can I come back tomorrow, just to talk? Not to ask for anything. I nodded. You can come back when you are ready to listen, not before. He walked down the steps and into the evening light. For the first time in years, he did not check his phone as he left. The next morning, I drove downtown to the law office of Raymond Osei, an attorney I had known since Herman's passing. His office sat on the 5th floor of an old brick building off Main Street, the kind of building Houston keeps forgetting to demolish. The elevator groaned on the way up, and the hallway smelled faintly of old carpet and fresh coffee. Raymond stood when I entered. Opal. It has been too long. Please, sit. I placed the binder on his desk. I need to revise my will. I want to create a trust, and I need both done before the week is out. He opened the binder and studied the documents carefully. After several minutes, he looked up. Who were the intended beneficiaries of the trust? My granddaughter. Opal Fontaine. She is 15. The trust should be managed by a professional trustee until she turns 25. After that, it is hers. He nodded slowly. And your son? Renewed entirely, along with his wife. Raymond did not argue. He simply wrote it down. Then he paused. There is something you should know. About 4 months ago, your son's wife contacted this office asking about the process for obtaining conservatorship over an elderly parent. She did not use your name directly, but the circumstances she described matched yours closely enough that my paralegal flagged it. I felt the air leave my lungs, not in a gasp but in a slow, steady release, the way a tire loses pressure from a nail you did not see. Conservatorship. Not just power of attorney, full legal control over my person, my finances, my decisions. She wanted to have me declared incapable. Jolene had not been callous, she had been strategic. I sat very still for a moment, then straightened in my chair. That makes what I am doing today even more necessary, Raymond agreed. We spent the next 2 hours drafting every document I needed. The will was rewritten cleanly. The trust was structured precisely. Dwight and Jolene were removed from every legal instrument that had ever carried their names beside mine. When the final page was signed and witnessed, Raymond placed the folder in his safe and looked at me with an expression I can only describe as respect. You waited longer than most people would have, Opal, but you got here. I picked up my purse and stood. Better late than silent. That evening, Dwight came back as he said he would. He knocked softly. No Jolene, no anger, no list of demands. He sat on the couch with his hands in his lap and talked for a long time. Not about money, not about the cards, not about the mortgage. He talked about the years after his father died. How lost he felt. How he leaned on me because it was easier than learning how to stand. How Jolene's expectations grew and he met them with my money, instead of his own effort because it was the path of least resistance. How he watched himself become a man who could not pay his own electric bill despite earning a decent salary, because the lifestyle he was living was never built on anything real. I didn't see it, Mama, he said. I'm not saying that to excuse it. I'm saying it because I need you to know that I finally do. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I spoke carefully, seeing the problem as the beginning. But fixing it is a daily choice. I will not go back to the way things were. I cannot. He nodded. I know. I don't want you to. I want to earn my way back, not to your money, to your respect. Those words settled over the room like the first cool breeze after a long, brutal summer. I did not say I forgave him. Forgiveness was not something I could hand out like a check, but I told him the door was open for him to try, and for the first time, trying seemed to mean something to him. After he left, I locked the door and turned off the porch light. The house was quiet, no buzzing phone, no demands wrapped in politeness, no guilt disguised as love. I washed my single teacup, set it in the rack, and stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard where Herman had once planted tomatoes every April. The plants were long gone, but the raised bed he built from scrap lumber was still there, weathered but solid. The next morning, I woke before the sun, not from worry, but from something gentler, a calmness I barely recognized. I made tea, opened the kitchen window, and let the sounds of the neighborhood drift inside. A mockingbird on the fence. A garage door rolling up somewhere down the block. The distant hiss of a bus stopping on Wheeler. My phone buzzed once. A text from Sable. Good morning, Grandma. I just want you to know I love you. And I think what you did was really brave. I typed back, thank you, baby. You are braver than you know. A few minutes later, another message. From Dwight. Mama, I don't expect anything. I just want to say thank you for letting me sit with you last night. I'm going to start making things right. Starting with myself. I read the message twice, then set the phone on the table. I did not rush to reply. Some things need to breathe before you answer them. I stepped outside onto the front porch. The Houston sky stretched wide and pale above the rooftops, and the air was warm and still. I walked down the block slowly, feeling the sidewalk beneath my shoes, the weight of my own body moving through a morning that belonged only to me. For 9 years, I had carried my family on my back while they stood on my shoulders and called it their own height. I had confused sacrifice with love and silence with strength. I had given until the giving became invisible, and the people I gave to stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a resource. But standing on that sidewalk in Third Ward, with the sun pressing gently against my face and the sound of my own breathing steady in my ears, I finally understood what I had been too afraid to admit. You do not owe anyone the parts of yourself that keep you whole. You can love your children without letting them consume you. You can be generous without becoming invisible. And boundaries are not punishment. They are the walls of the house you build around your own dignity, so that when the storm comes, you still have somewhere safe to stand. I turned back toward home. The front door was open the way I had left it, and the kettle was still warm on the stove. I poured another cup of tea, sat down at Herman's table, and let the quiet fill the room. At 68, I discovered something I wish someone had told me years ago. Peace does not arrive when everyone around you is satisfied. Peace arrives the moment you stop setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Before you go, tell me, what lesson did you take from this story? And what city are you watching from?